All right. We have the green signal. We are live.
Great.
This is episode 2 of the Last Minute Audition podcast.
Question.
Yes.
Is this not episode 1?
Well, technically, episode 1 was last week when I did my 11-minute kind of soliloquy / monologue.
Right. But we're not sharing that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, yes, no, this is actually technically episode 1. That was technically my Frank segment rant, I guess you could call it. So, yes, you're right. This is episode 1 of the Last Minute Audition podcast. We have the other half of the team here. We have Anthony here. We did record an episode last week that didn't turn out so well because of technical difficulty. So I told everyone about that before, so they're aware of that from the previous segment.
Yeah, we don't want to make it seem like we're liars who don't hold our end of the bargain with release dates.
No, you don't want to. We don't want to seem that way at all. No, we don't want to seem like liars about holding.
We're
bargains
not politicians. We're just guys doing a podcast that happen to be actors.
Indeed. That's a good segue point for this. I wanted to, because I kind of gave a little of my reasoning last week for why I was here doing this stuff here in LA, what inspired me to come out here and things like that. So, because you and I have talked about it before, but I wanted to get more of a clear sense from you as well. Like, why? Because you came from across the country.
As did you, but yeah.
Yeah, but the reason I say that is like I think, and I noticed it when I was here because I went to school here, as you know, and I noticed from individuals that went to school here in Southern California, but were from Southern California, there was a tendency to kind of, I don't know, it maybe felt like it didn't mean as much to them as it meant to me sometimes. Does that make any sense?
What do you mean? Like, didn't mean as much to who? Who's them?
Like, so I'm tying this together with, like, you moved here from Florida. You moved across the country. That your stakes in being here are high.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you sacrificed time with your family in order to come out here.
I mean, I did, but I also think that anybody who's fresh out of high school, you know, your job is to kind of flock from the nest and learn how to kind of adapt and live on your own. I think that's the idea. I don't really think I'm missing out on family time. I think it's actually more normal to just venture out. I mean, that's just kind of how people grow, I think. You know, you did the same. I did the same.
Yeah. Do you, what would you say is your biggest difference that you've experienced from Southwest Florida to Los Angeles?
Well, the weather. I mean, it's hot in both places, but in one place, extraordinarily humid. And in Los Angeles, it's more of a dry desert. I like living in Los Angeles. I live in a city in Los Angeles, being Los Angeles, I mean. So where I'm from, being also a city, it's not as like established, if that makes sense. I mean, people know where Fort Myers is, I think, generally. A lot of people do anyway, but it's not like LA. It's not on the map in the same way. It doesn't have the same like architecture. It's more of a smaller beach town.
So what would you say, besides the weather and the what you would refer to as the establishment of the cities, like culturally, what would you say is the biggest difference between Fort Myers, Florida, and Los Angeles?
I think culturally speaking, in Fort Myers, you do have more, I guess you could say it is a melting pot, but it definitely leans towards more of, I guess, a conservative, older crowd for sure. Not to say that, not saying there's anything wrong with it or anything. It's just different. Whereas there, people are not pro-establishment as they are here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
People here love rules. People here love to fucking say what you should be doing with your life Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Tell you how to fucking live. And there, I don't know, at home, I feel as if I grew up with people who just kind of mind their own business. Maybe a little bit more of a layback type of place too. Also, where I live, that's probably why.
Why do you think that L.A. is like that and Fort Myers, Florida, is more laid back? Like, what do you think? Why do you think Los Angeles, based on your perception and opinion, why do you think that L.A. is more into rules and uptight? And as you had said, that people like to tell each other what to do. Why do you think that is?
Well, here people spend so much of their time trying to impress everybody else, right? So their own opinions aren't even their own opinions here half the time. People don't even realize it. They just say whatever people want to hear half the time here. Because I mean, I understand that being in a place like Los Angeles, it's more competitive environment, and you need to get ahead by kind of kissing ass a little bit and
blending in, surviving.
Right. It's not that I don't get it. I do completely understand. But in where I'm from, there's, it's more in like the establishing phase. People are still focusing on the development aspect of Fort Myers. So people can kind of just do what they want to do and whatever works for them. You don't have to really think about people judging you, whereas I feel as Los Angeles is a very judgmental place.
Interesting.
It has everything to do with the people, is what it is. It's what makes every place different.
Do you think in LA it also has something to do with the entertainment industry itself? Since a lot of it is based on like looks, the way your body is, things like that, that there is somewhat of a superficial element to it. Do you think that plays a part in it?
Oh, 100%. Excuse me. I 100% think there is, because people love to virtue signal here. They really do. So as much as they say they are on your side, caring is more of a selling tactic than it actually is what it's meant out to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
People use it as a sales pitch here. It's just whatever sells is what's trending.
So, but why do you think that is? Like, how do you think that developed culturally out here? Like, but by meaning, do you think that it is somehow associated with a form of survival? That if I somehow blend into the middle of the pack, I will then survive to further my career, further my own ambitions, further my own goals, etc. Do you think it's a survival thing?
Oh, yeah. Well, more or less, a lot of people here are just sheep's in wolf clothing, or wolf in sheep's clothing. Sorry. And, you can't just. Everybody's trying to get ahead here at whatever cost that is. So that is a survival tactic, yes.
Do you think that is somehow further perpetuated by, say, the entertainment industry? Or do you think it's something that's perpetuated by the political culture and how that has blended with the entertainment industry?
Well, it's both. I think they're both one.
They're hand in hand.
Yeah. I think politics in this country is nothing more than a show.
It's theater, is what you're saying.
100% it's theater. It's all, everybody's disingenuous when it comes to it. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is money. That's how all these people think. As long as you have, because, I mean, let's face it, money does equal power. It's instinctual to just want to be the most powerful alpha out there.
But in LA, it's weird because I feel like, because I have a similar experience with LA, that you're using words like power, money, instinctual, wanting to be alpha, right? But in LA, it feels like that people may want to be the alpha, but their tactics are not alpha tactics. that it's not on display. It's not a show of let's have a competitive whoever's the best that wins. That there is a an underhanded backhandedness that plays a part of it, right?
Right. That's what I mean by a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah,
They they pretend like you need them more than they need you, and that's never the reality. Everybody brings something different to the table and unique. So I I would say here people are manipulative, very deceptive a lot of times. I mean, that's the experience I get more often than not. But that doesn't mean I don't meet some pretty incredible people out here, because I do. I actually am very fortunate to have been surrounded myself with some pretty genuine, kind-hearted, good people, such as yourself. And, unfortunately, you have to weed your way through some bad apples more than anything.
and
But that's just life.
true. Yeah, it is. Do you? What made you? Because I'm sure you weren't aware of this when you decided that you wanted to do this. That all of the things that you just mentioned about Los Angeles, but what made you want to move from your small town of Fort Myers, Florida, and pursue acting in a place like LA? Because I'm sure you knew, like, the size of the city, that this is exponentially larger than Fort Myers, Florida. So what made you want to come out here and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw my name into the bucket and see what happens, and I'm going to pursue this path here in Los Angeles?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's no reward without a risk. So,
But acting specifically.
well, it's the thing.
Like, what made you want to do that?
It's funny because I think it comes back full circle. I actually thoroughly enjoy acting, but I gotta say, when I was in high school, I studied drama in high school, but I had a teacher. She was one of my English teachers, my favorite teacher, Miss Butts. And
Miss Butts?
yeah, she was awesome.
Butts?
Correct.
Wow. What a what a fucking name.
Dude, she is the best. I don't think I've ever heard anybody actually even trying to make fun of that name at all. But it's
What? No, I don't believe that.
swear, dude,
That's like a softball pitch.
It was like if you made fun of that, it was like the equivalent of making fun of Jesus. She was that awesome. She was everybody's favorite teacher, and she was the one that all students could feel as if they could confine in, which is great.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, she was one of the coolest teachers I think I've ever had in my life.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had a teacher like that in high school. Taught history. I still to this day, he actually was up for an award. I think he won like best history teacher in the state of Pennsylvania, like some national teacher award. But then
it's probably like a golden apple. Is that what they call it there?
You know what? I'm not even sure, but it's something that's recognized by the union. And then he was up for, I think, nationally some award as well for like one of the best history teachers. The guy was absolutely brilliant, Mr. Floof.
Floof.
A P. Fuck, I'm gonna mess. I think it's PFLUGH.
Pafloof.
Floof was his name, Mr. Floof. I'm telling you, man, he could make
cool
any
name.
he could make any history topic interesting. That's honestly is like why I love history so much is I honestly credit him. I think I always had that, but he nurtured that when I was in high school.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to have good teachers. Anyway, back to the point about
What was the point, Miss Butts?
Yeah, so what inspired me to want to continue on the path of acting was it goes back to the power dynamic we were talking about. Not that I was in search of the power as much as I was in search of respect. And if you think about it, a lot of these big name actors, they're probably the most respected people on this planet. Does that make sense? They don't really bring controversy to the table as much as like a politician. Like the president of the United States doesn't hone in the same amount of power, I feel, as somebody like Robert Downey Jr. who plays Iron Man, right? I mean, he's a bigger influential figure, in my opinion, is the way I see it. Because a lot of people aspire to be somebody more like him and they would say like whoever's. I've never looked up to anybody who was the president in my lifetime. Does that make sense? Like that person is the president, and that's it. They make the rules.
Yeah, like you're saying that you've never felt like there's been a president in this country that you've looked at and been like, oh my god, like you were proud. Like, would proud be a word to use? Like you didn't feel proud, anything like that? Is that an appropriate word to use? Like proud to have them as a president?
I wouldn't even say that. I would say if I was looking to be the president of the United States, it was because I didn't like the work that the current president of the United States is doing. As opposed to like
Another technical difficulty.
oh shit, this thing's falling out.
The microphone's coming out.
It's all right.
Take a moment, just put that back in. That's fine.
Well,
Make sure that it's locked into place.
It is. It's just slipping.
Yeah, just push it back even further. Another technical difficulty. The mic arm is just coming off the table.
I don't even know how that happened.
All that nasty sounding noise right there. That's what you hear. You got to pull that back
the
in.
table is bending.
What do you mean? No, undo that the whole way so we can get in there. Yeah, undo it the whole way and just push it the whole way in. Sorry about that, everyone. Having a little technical difficulty. You can skip this section of the podcast if you want to. Make sure it's really tight. That's there. It's got to be like super, super tight.
Yeah.
Is it in?
Yeah.
There we go. Cool.
It's as
Awesome.
tight as possible.
Awesome. So going back to, what were we saying? You were talking about...
So I was saying that an actor being some of the most respectable people on this planet, I was referencing somebody like Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
And I was going on to say that if I were to look into wanting to be the president of the United States, it would specifically be because I don't condone the current behavior or decisions that the current president of the United States is making. Does that make sense? And that's what would aspire me to be the president, being like, God, these fuckheads don't even know what they're doing. Whereas if I were inspired
So it would be to prove, it would be to show that you could do a better job.
exactly
Would be the reason that you would want to pursue that particular career path.
right. And as an actor, I would just feel more honored to be able to perform alongside somebody like De Niro or DiCaprio or Downey Jr., right? Like, I wouldn't be competing with them as much as I would just feel to be honored to work with them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's just the way I see it. They're not as controversial. Now, however, you want actors who step into politics, that's controversial for sure. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah. That makes me feel like, what how do you define controversy then?
Well, it's basically...
How do you define it?
Well, it's basically saying because you're one way, the other way makes you less of a person. There's no real balance, right? That's controversial. Is if it's all one way, and if you're the other way, you're like degraded because of it. Does that make sense?
Not really. It doesn't feel that clear to me. Wait. Let me. Maybe I'll re-ask. Let me try to find a way to rephrase the question. Like, instead of...
No, I understand what you're saying. You're asking me what I think the word controversial means. And if you were to debate on something, it meant you were making a decision that one way or the other is considered extreme no matter which direction you go in. Does that make sense?
It does. It do you think that maybe truth, and however it's disguised, that like whatever the truth would be considered controversial?
Well, I don't think that truth should ever be controversial. However, I think in the day and age that we live in, it seems to be the case, honestly.
That the truth is something that is it causes divisiveness, you think?
Well, I think people using something like the word science around, where, you know, they've now made science a controversial thing to talk about, which is weird. Something that's meant to be questioned. All of a sudden, it's like going against the word of Jesus Christ if you are just a little curious.
It's like the Spanish Inquisition era form of Catholicism.
Yeah, it's really weird. So it's almost as if something that should just be direct and straightforward all of a sudden made it feel like there was just this cult of people it created.
Why do you think that is? You think it's power?
It is about power. It's about money. I think it's also a distraction more than anything. You take something that's scary and you just throw all this shade that works in both like on both ends of the spectrum, and you make everybody in the middle fight while you go off and do some weird
Nefarious,
fucking
weird
nefarious shit. Yeah.
weirdness. So who do you? But who do you think is the they that's doing the nefarious, weird shit? Like, who do you think the they is? If you're saying that whatever this thing this person, if they are putting this fear thing in the down here in the base where everyone is, and then these two sides are fighting over this thing, and then someone else goes off and does this nefarious weird thing. What is that? Who is they?
It's me. No, I think that there are people who aren't in the spotlight, but they have a lot of control over the people who are. Now, whether that's with money or maybe some form of blackmail, I don't know. But I think that there are people who have a stronghold on the narrative that we hear and see.
This is interesting because this original point of this conversation was about why you decided to become an actor and like how it descended into this idea of power.
I guess
right?
that's why I wanted to be an actor.
To be a part of this nefarious weirdness, the
I want to be part of the they cult.
The they, there you go.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though because it's like it just went down that rabbit hole of whatever that is. But it goes back to what you're saying about being an actor and how you felt respect. You would feel honored and respected to be alongside someone like Robert Downey Jr., DiCaprio, De Niro, any of these guys to perform next to them, and you were making that comparable to the presidency of the United States. That's where if you ever wanted to pursue that path, politics, what have you, it would be out of a sense of wanting to prove that whoever is in that position of power, to prove them wrong or to show that you are better than them at that position. But with acting, it's a more purified approach. Is that what you're saying? Where it's like it's still about power. It feels like there is a sense of power.
Well,
when all the eyes are on you, there's power in that.
Well, yeah, I mean, to an extent, yes, but it's purely more animalistic, I suppose, like as a defense mechanism. I don't want to be like powerful as opposed to weak. Does that make sense?
But you're saying that this is why you got into acting?
Oh, no, that's not why I got into acting. I'm saying that when I reference power, it's not an ego thing. It's more of a survival tactic thing. It's more of like, I know this is what I need to do to get by because I want to be an actor based off of the craft. I think it's a very respectful and difficult craft. I think that there's a lot that goes into it, psychologically speaking, as an actor to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just find enjoyment out of watching people perform on such a high level, and I would love to give back on the end of enjoyment. I wouldn't want to come off as somebody controversial like a politician, if that makes sense. I want someone to just look at what I do and feel inspired. Because that's how I feel when I look at actors. I look at them, I mean, good actors, I should say, but I respect all of them on their own level because it does take guts. But like I said, you watch a good performance, like, you know, anything De Niro has done really, or DiCaprio, right? Like those examples I gave earlier. I mean, I can't think of a single ill performance between the two.
Yeah, someone like DiCaprio. I mean, you can feel he puts his heart and soul into his work. He's very dedicated to his work and his craft, and you can feel the time that he's put into what it is that he's doing. I think that's what's always attractive about an individual when you watch them on screen or on stage. That is the amount of time you can feel the time, you can feel the heart, you can feel the passion, you can feel the connection, and all of those additions together equals talent. In my opinion, it shows off. People just look at that and say, "Wow, DiCaprio, he's so talented." He may have natural talent, right? That started when he was a little kid, but all of that feels that it came together just through his hard work, through his dedication, through his passion, and through his growth as an actor and as an artist. Someone for me that always I would feel that way with is Daniel Day Lewis. Like where it almost felt like he always felt like almost like Michelangelo,
Oh,
like
dude.
or like some or like Da Vinci, like some artist that was taking so much time to craft. I don't want to call him crafting a performance because there's so much of it that happens in the moment, that happens when the red light is on, but just crafting this soul of a person around whatever it is that he's doing. And you can feel it on screen. You can feel this complete molecular transformation of of him and the character. From if you look at Gangs in New York, you look at Last of the Mohicans, you look at Lincoln, There Will Be Blood, you get this complete transformation, this molecular soul transforming performance that it I feel like I'm watching Mozart work or Beethoven work or any of these people work in their craft is what it feels like. That it's transcendent.
Daniel Day Lewis, I will say, is one of the best actors I've ever seen perform. And if you ever notice how ingrained he is with his characters that he plays, you could tell he puts work into it. And when you look deeper, you start to realize, oh man, he worked so hard and so long on something that he basically becomes that person, and you can't even tell half the time that it is Daniel Day Lewis. He prepares, if I'm not mistaken, a year in advance for roles. So if somebody wants to book him, he says, "Give me 1 year," and he will develop that character over the course of that time.
Yeah, he takes his time.
He does, and you know, he's aware that it's a very important element into perfecting your craft is taking the time to make sure that it's perfect. It's worth it, obviously, because everything he does
Yeah, as a viewer, yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
Even one of his more recent ones, Phantom Thread. I don't know if you ever saw that. It's Paul Thomas Anderson, I believe. Great movie. Not particularly my go-to film. However, his performance is what kept me in the whole time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's a since I started acting, he was the one. Gangs of New York was a big one. Last of the Mohicans. Uh, My Left Foot was another one. Those were just In the Name of the King was another one. Earlier pieces of his work, and just the guys. He just always felt like this classical artist to me. I get this classical Renaissance man vibe when I would watch him work and everything that he did. And the further I got along with my craft and understanding, you're like, oh man. And you could start to see these other nuances in these decisions and choices and the specificity that he made as he would go along with a character in a film. And it's completely awe inspiring and breathtaking. And there will never be another actor Him, I think. And the amount of dedication that he would have in his work. I don't think there would be anyone like him.
Well, I'd like to say ideally that most actors, you would think there's not going to be anybody like that actor, right?
Right, right.
But I know what you mean. He's that unique. Whereas you can look at somebody like Clooney, right? Well, he's unique, yes, but at the same time, I suppose you could find somebody that's like, oh, this kind of reminds me of George Clooney a little bit.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed George Clooney's work a lot.
Oh, me too.
I think he actually is more talented as an actor than he actually lets on
Well, him
in his
and
work.
him and Brad Pitt are both those like really good-looking leading men,
Yeah,
and you would look at them thinking, "Oh, they're just these two great-looking guys," but they're actually fantastic actors, especially Brad Pitt.
well, Brad Pitt to me he's a character actor in a leading man's body.
He is. It's so
Just from the
funny.
beginning of the stuff that he did, even in True Romance, which was I don't even I think it was it might have been his first film, where he played like the stoner on the couch. Do you remember that?
Talking about True Romance, is that the one
True Romance.
Tarantino wrote?
Yeah, the Tarantino
Yeah.
wrote. Yeah.
Yeah.
With I can't
Was he
even
with
think of
Sam
their first
Jackson in
names.
that scene? Is that with him and
No,
Sam
actually,
Jackson?
he's with
Oh,
James Gandolfini.
That's right.
Yeah, James Gandolfini
That's
plays
right.
one of the mobsters. Like
And he
one,
lets
one
him
of-
in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
And what's crazy is that movie it's a cool piece of trivia because there's another movie that they're both in that's from just a couple of years ago. It was right after, it was like maybe a couple years after Sopranos ended. Um, Killing Them Softly.
Oh, I forgot about that's.
And
a
they're
great
in that
one.
movie together. And I
Yeah.
think the last time they were in a movie together was True Romance before that. You're talking like 20 years,
Yeah, but
maybe
that's
more.
but that's a thing. You know, a lot of people.
No, but they come on. I mean, but two guys like that are big time stars. You know, I don't know. I thought that was cool. That's like a cool.
There's a new Martin Scorsese film coming out, with DiCaprio and De Niro, and if I'm not mistaken, the last time they did a movie together was This Boy's Life in the '90s when DiCaprio was a child.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I think it's Killers of the Flower Moon, or what is the name of that? It's based off of the book Killers of the Flower Moon, or it's something about a Native American tribe and a FBI agent. I can't remember anything about what the story is, but I just know that it's a Martin Scorsese picture with DiCaprio as the lead and Robert De Niro also involved.
Oh man, that cast. I mean, with the cast, direct everything. That already sounds like a hit, or that just sounds like a good movie.
Oh, I know. I actually kind of remember reading a little bit of the synopsis to the story, and it kind of sounded like maybe it was something I wanted to read the book to before I watched the film and see how they compare.
When is it supposed to come out?
I know they were filming last year, so I would anticipate sometime this year
Nice.
for it to come out. Yeah. I think DiCaprio is also supposed to be doing a movie playing Da Vinci. Funny enough.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I think.
Wow, he'd be an interesting Da Vinci.
Yeah, I saw that somewhere. I don't know. Again,
That'd be interesting.
I don't know everything.
Okay, so going back to what we were saying though, because we're getting
Are we getting off
veered
topic?
No, well, we're in the ballpark. We're in the ballpark range. So we concluded as to why, like, you know, you feel inspired by actors that inspire you, and you feel the impetus to give that back through your own career, and that's what inspires you to keep going, right?
Correct.
Do you feel like do you ever feel like that LA is not that place to
Uh,
cultivate that?
Uh, I will say, after living in Los Angeles, you realize that we live in an era of create your own content. So it doesn't really matter where you are. And considering if you live in somewhere like Atlanta, I mean, you could just work full time as an actor living in Atlanta. They shoot a ton of film and television in Atlanta nowadays. Same thing with Austin, Texas. I feel as if, you know, somewhere like Austin, Texas, or maybe parts of Arizona or Oklahoma, right? Because they do a lot of movies or film, I should say, out in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
So they hire locally more often than not. But obviously, if you're somebody who is booking frequently as like a speaking role where you'll end up having to work on a soundstage somewhere, yeah, it would probably be more convenient to live in a place like Los Angeles because all the sound stages are here.
Do you ever feel like when you ever feel that based on all of the films you watched as a kid, all of your inspirations? I remember, you had told me before, like Tarantino was like a major inspiration of you, for you and his work, his body of work.
Right.
That like you would like kill to be in one of his films. Like it would just top. It's like a bucket list kind of thing, right?
I could die happily the next day knowing that I
Yeah.
shot something with Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah. So I mean, you think okay. So think of. Do you ever feel like in LA that your idea of what it would be like to pursue acting here in the industry in Los Angeles? Do you ever feel like that it's just nowhere near as cracked up as what it was led to believe, and that all the movies that inspired you when you were younger, that they're not even making that kind of quality of work anymore? Do you ever feel that? Do you ever feel like things have gotten so dumbed down?
Well, I do feel that way, and I can talk about this particular thing for a while. A lot of it has to do with the film market that's being catered to. I could specifically go into China. People cater to whatever it is that they want to show there, considering the money. And it's obviously has something to do with the population. And it's tough because they have a very censored government there, so you're pretty limited as to what you can produce and cater to their country. Because you want to make money. Obviously, you put $200 million into something, it is hard to domestically make $200 million in the box office unless it's a Marvel film. And they're already catering to China anyway. So it does have a lot to do with money. I'm not going to say I don't understand, but I definitely don't condone that. Somebody like Quentin Tarantino is somebody that doesn't just bend the knee to China.
Well, his work feels like it's specifically made for a very specific type of audience.
See, I think that most people, there's very, very few people I think that dislike his work. I don't think that, I think maybe those few people could be loud, but overall, I have yet to come across anybody personally
That doesn't like Tarantino.
that doesn't like Tarantino. It's pretty rare, I would say.
It's interesting because he feels like to me Scorsese is this way too. Like Scorsese does this thing where in his films, in most of his films, you get like a glimpse into this older generation, that like World War II generation kind of lifestyle and how things were in this country. A lot of Italian American influence and stuff, which is great because that has its place in Americana, like in the American lexicon of culture. It has its place. So I always enjoy Scorsese for that. And Tarantino has developed his own superb personal flair of storytelling that is so unique unto himself, with that spaghetti western type of story that has kind of like a Japanese style influences in it as well, and with the fighting scenes, like it's so entertaining and it feels so authentic and real to who he is.
I love that everything he does, while it may feel like it's in the same universe, I guess you could say, it's all so different. Tarantino, I'm talking about. Whereas Scorsese, being also one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, he does have a lot of projects that are very similar to one another, right? Specifically gangster films or crime drama type. But nevertheless, still one of the best filmmakers of all time is Martin Scorsese. He's top 5, easy.
Well, but Scorsese has this interesting, because it to me, what makes his work so unique, and I'm thinking of like, I don't know, the first two films just popped off the top of my head. They're kind of his most recent is The Irishman and then The Departed, right?
The Departed, I think, is my favorite movie of all time.
Really?
I think
Wow.
it's my favorite movie of all time. It's that or Pulp Fiction. They've always been the tie in my head. I'd even argue to say Django. But yeah, Departed's one of my favorite movies of all time.
That movie, I was saying that Scorsese has this way of telling these stories about guys, how guys specifically try to survive in different time periods. Like obviously, The Departed is a modern story, where The Irishman goes way back, and then it goes even, and then it just back. Like there's like at the beginning is like way back,
Right.
and how guys had to make a living to survive, and like this other code and this other culture that I'm sure when Scorsese was our age was something that you didn't really talk about. Like it wasn't a thing that was known within a standard American home. It was very much underground. It was the alternative world of America, the mafia and stuff like that. Now it's become entertainment. You know, it's purely entertainment at this point. It's not something that is. I mean, how many times do you hear about the mafia in the news?
Well,
Like never.
it's rare. Yeah, you would never hear anything about it. And generally, I'd like to think that everybody's a good guy, but people are bought off, and the mafia can afford to do things like that. I was also going to go back to what you were saying. The Irishman. I think that's one of my favorite movies of Scorsese because it's recent, but it's fantastic. I love all the acting in it, and I love that story. I think it's great. But I think about his work, like The Irishman or Goodfellas or Casino. They're all unique in their own way because it tells a different story, but more or less, it's a very similar format. That makes sense. It's also similar concepts as well too. But I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Well,
That's like his thing too.
There's always like the criminal element. It's like, and he does an interesting job that I really enjoy. Is he has a way of humanizing these guys that live more degenerate lifestyles. Is what he does. He humanizes gangsters, which is his thing, and he does a really good job at it. Where The Departed to me is even a little bit more complex than what he normally would do with say Goodfellas or The Irishman, and it has this sense of because you have like the cop character, which is Matt Damon. You have Nicholson's character, which is the gangster, and then you have DiCaprio, who's in the middle, and he's trying to infiltrate this world, while the one guy's actually supposed to be representing the law, but he's actually double crossing the law to be in this world. Like it's this complex, chasing the rabbit kind of thing. And I think that Scorsese just has a really nice touch with humanizing all of them, giving them a sense of humor and a lightness to their danger. He does it really well. I mean, Nicholson does it really well in that movie, but there's a lightness to him. He's funny, he's charming, but there's an edge the whole time. You never know when he's just gonna. I haven't seen this movie in so long, but I can just pull up these memories of it when he takes DiCaprio like hurt his hand, and he has a cast on his hand, and Nicholson just takes his boot and starts bashing his hand, to get like, are you a rat? Are you a cop? Are you a cop? Are you a cop? To get him to break, to admit that he's like undercover, and that's his way of initiating him to get him around, to get involved in this gang and whatever it is that they're doing, whatever nefarious illegal things they're doing. And that's a credit to Scorsese for writing the character, but then it's also a credit to Scorsese for casting Nicholson, and credit to Nicholson for that performance. Like and maybe it's just me as a guy, but it's watching movies like that. It's like you can't go wrong watching a movie like that.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, and I was gonna, tie this in as well as what I was saying earlier. The market for a Scorsese film, actually, I would even argue to say a Tarantino as well. It's not. I mean, most people get into it, but it's particular. It's specific.
Yeah,
it's very niche. It doesn't really. It doesn't make. It's not like a Steven Spielberg where he'll make so many, like a range of different things.
Yeah.
right? He'll make Schindler's List, but he'll also make Jaws or Indiana Jones, right? He, so he's Steven Spielberg.
Spielberg
got a
has this.
variety.
Well, Spielberg's great talent to me is he has this unbelievable touch with making something very broad. He takes a broad concept, but makes it feel so specific as the viewer, is what he does. Like Jurassic Park, for example, and I know that was like a book, but like Jurassic Park, for example, you're like, it's a park with dinosaurs where these people made they genetically engineered things to make dinosaurs. But you combined the introduction of certain shots and how you see them, right? He's so good at choosing moments to show you something that it has such a deep impact on you that it will resonate with you anytime you even think of the movie. Like in Jurassic Park, I think of when Dr. Grant is in their crew is in that the Jeep or whatever, and they're driving through that big field, and it's the first time that you actually see, even as the audience. So you get to experience it with these lead characters, the characters you've been following the whole time. You get to see the dinosaurs for the first time. It's like it's like the big opening with all the brontosauruses and all that stuff walking, and the music at that iconic.
Yeah, anything with John Williams is like.
But I'm saying all of those elements combined, as the viewer, you're like it becomes iconic in your own Rolodex of film moments, and Spielberg does that better than I think like anybody. It's like, and these are broad. It's just the way he paints these pictures, and I think it's amazing that and I think that's what's given him such this amazing consistency in his career. He's unbelievably consistent, and it's the stories he chooses to tell as well that they have something heartfelt and you can connect with them. It's like it's almost like it's everyone's experience. Like because he directed Forrest Gump, didn't he?
No, that was. That wasn't Steven. It was.
No. Not Forrest Gump.
Saving Private Ryan.
Well, yeah, I mean, Saving Private Ryan as well. Catch Me If You Can.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Catch Me If You Can is a great. This movie is. It's literally a guy chasing a criminal, the entire movie. That's the idea, the broad stroke of the movie. But it also there's like these amazing elements of almost like a crime noir sense to it, even though it's not shot that way, but it's the way that it's edited. It's some of the music, and it has like a this almost nostalgic feel to it. And that movie was made in like the 2000s.
Yeah, it was like 2006 maybe or something.
But I'm saying like it could have easily been the same year that like say Chinatown was made.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It has like that there's this nostalgic feel to his film, like to that film in particular. But he has this amazing way of painting broad strokes and then just painting the right thing and putting it in the right moment at the right time of the picture, and I don't know, it just becomes an iconic piece in your mind. That's what Steven Spielberg does. He creates iconic moments better than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, he also is really good at bringing the perfect team of people together. I mean, the music that's incorporated into his films plays a huge part as to why they're as memorable as they are too, and the actors that portray them.
Yeah.
The movies that he does and did were always way ahead of his time, visually speaking. Like when Jurassic Park came out, or when Jaws,
Yeah.
and that came out in like the 70s, that was like everybody probably thought that was the realest looking thing on the planet. I mean, you watch it today, obviously you could tell it's animatronic or whatever.
How many people do you think were permanently afraid of swimming in the ocean because of that movie?
I was one of those people as a
You're one
child.
of those and you live near the ocean too.
Well, it didn't keep me from going into it, but I took sharks into consideration quite frequently.
But isn't that fucking crazy that a
It's
movie
very crazy.
did that?
Yeah, it's
Generations of people.
Yeah, it's really cool though that he had that effect.
Iconic.
Oh yeah,
He creates iconic moments. Indiana Jones is another one. He has this. He just has this gift of being able to do that, and I'm sure it's not just him. It's his team of whoever he has around him, but it's such a credit. I think of like how many just happy childhood moments that I've had, just like going to go see a Steven Spielberg film.
Oh, same, dude.
And it's just he's I'm like grateful that he exists. You know what
I love
mean?
that he's still making stuff today too. Like he made something I thought, I feel like this was such an amazing movie, and I almost feel as if it wasn't talked about enough. Have you seen Ready Player One?
No, I haven't seen. Did he direct that?
Yeah, that's Spielberg.
Wow.
Dude, it's fantastic.
All first person movie?
No. It's not it's not all first person. But it's a guy who's in a VR. It takes place in the future, and he basically, it's like the metaverse actually, which is kind of funny. He basically developed a life in there, but it has all of these old characters that are in there as well too, like the Iron Giant, for example. He's got that in the movie. It's like random nostalgic elements that are thrown into the film.
Oh, that's cool.
Like video game nostalgia and animated nostalgia stuff too as well. It's really cool, man. It's really, really cool. It's a great movie if anybody hasn't seen it yet.
That's really cool.
I mean, it's Steven Spielberg. You can go wrong. But you know why I think it was also overlooked? I think he did Bridge of Spies the same year. Or within, I think it was the same year. Have you seen that movie?
I don't think so.
Oh, dude. It's Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks.
Mark Rylance won the Oscar for that movie.
Oh, he's amazing, man.
He is so... Dude, if you watch that movie, you're like...
So good.
Dude, he's fantastic.
What's the newest, the DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, the film?
Don't Look Up.
Oh my God.
He was great.
He's so funny in that movie.
He
is so good in that movie.
In that movie, now tell me if you think this sounds crazy. I felt like he channeled two people to make this character. It feels like a mix of Joe Biden and Elon Musk. I swear to God, like I watched him, I'm like, oh my God, he looks and talks like Joe Biden, but he's like Elon Musk with how his character is basically Elon Musk.
Yeah, he's like in his own world almost.
And Jeff Bezos almost too, a little bit.
Yeah. He's so good, man. I watched a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. It's very recent. It's one of Johnny Depp's newest films with what's his name? Robert Pattinson has a small role, and Mark Rylance is the lead, and it's called something the Barbarians. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was when Depp's whole legal situation was going on. Like they had finished shooting, so it got like it didn't get a lot of press or whatever. But it's about this. Mark Rylance plays he plays like a governor of this small encampment or like fort that is, oh man, I can't even remember. I watched this a couple months ago, but it's on the edge of a desert. I think it's somewhere in northern Africa. I think it's northern Africa, and it takes place, I want to say, probably like 100 years ago, maybe, or even more, like 135, 40 years ago is where it's supposed to take place. And he's just brilliant in the movie. He's absolutely brilliant. And it's a very intense movie to watch. It's like it's not a comedy at all. It's a complete drama. But he's with like the natives that are there, and he has this good working relationship with them. And the Depp is a soldier that's brought in to do something that I can't remember exactly the entire plot. Depp is actually really good in it too, but Mark Rylance is just brilliant.
Yeah, Mark Rylance is one of those I actually love his career. Like when you look at careers, and everybody wants those like cool leading man careers, but I want one of those like really amazing, I play the lead sometimes, but like great supporting actor. You don't have to be the most famous guy in the world, but your role in the movies that you play in are so pivotal.
Yeah, I mean, you like are able to sprinkle in a little bit of flavor to kind of do that. You know what movie I just watched? It's like that. Is what is the name of the movie? It's Matt Damon, Ben Affleck. It's the
Not Good Will Hunting.
no. It's which is brand new. Adam Driver as well. They're the Knights. They're
The Last Duel.
the Last Duel.
Yeah, I
Man, that
haven't seen
movie
it. Is it
was
good?
so good. Holy shit!
It's on HBO.
Yeah. It's long. It's like 2:30 plus. It's a
Yeah.
long movie. If you're like, it's a film.
I don't mind that. I mean, I like that actually. I
It's
think
like-
2.5 hours is pretty good.
Yeah, it's long. There's some
To me, that
elements.
feels normal.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're gonna look, but here's the thing I will say: when you see a movie with Adam Driver, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, you don't normally think of a movie that's like a 2.5 hour long movie.
Yeah, I guess.
Like you don't really think of that because they're more like I don't know, they're more front of the line stars. They're kind of in that like 2 hour range for like movies, so it's a little bit longer, and it's also because the period piece as well. Like I can see some people getting bored with it. It's definitely for a certain type of person to see it. I'll say this about that movie: costumes amazing, sets incredible, acting incredible. Affleck is not the lead in the movie.
It's Adam Driver.
It's Adam Driver and Matt Damon.
Okay.
Affleck plays I would say, a very strong supporting role. He's fucking brilliant in that movie. There's something about like he's so he's entertaining. He's also the humor, the like I say humor. It's like it's like the Norman period of or it's like the 1300s of like France at the time. So I would say like humor, but
He's like
it's
the
not-
comedic relief.
yes, in this way, like all the comedy is around his scenes, and it's just kind of the way his character is. He plays like a rich. He is the cousin of the king in this movie. It's based on a true story. He's the cousin of the king. He's like the duke. I don't know if he's the duke, if that's the official title. I forget the official title that he has. But he taxes the regions, and they all pay him. He's the earl almost, I guess is what you would call it. That's not his title in the movie.
Right.
He's amazing. Adam Driver, amazing. Matt Damon like fucking goes for it in this movie. This is one of Matt Damon's best acting performances I've ever seen.
Wow.
I'm dead serious. He fucking goes for it in this movie. There's
cool.
moments where I don't even recognize him because it's his hair. He's got this. Whoever did the makeup at this movie too is amazing. He's got this insane like scar because he's a battle tested, just masculine to the core warrior in this movie. There are some writing aspects where I just felt were bullshit in the movie. There's some weird like there's some things in how he interacts. I don't want to ruin the movie for you because I want you to see it. There's just some writing that I feel like is not. I'm like, he wouldn't say that. Like in that period, like forget the time period. Like, but that's not how. It's just humans don't talk to each other that way.
Yeah. Well, that's an example of. I mean, I haven't seen it, but it sounds like how people dumb things down to just build a larger audience out of it.
Possibly, it's a great movie. I mean, it's one of, and I forget
I'll watch it.
who directed that. Was that
I just remember who directed Forrest Gump. Robert Zemeckis. Sorry, that name was like slipping out of my head and it was bothering me.
I can't remember who directed this. Was it Ridley Scott?
Oh, it is Ridley Scott.
It is Ridley Scott.
It is Ridley Scott.
Oh my God, I got to tell you this real quick. This is just it's not as well. It's called The Last Duel. So guess what? There's a duel at the end.
Oh,
I
is
won't-
it the last one?
It is. I won't tell you the end of the movie and who wins it, but I will just say this about that duel. It is the best fight choreographed scene maybe I've ever seen in a movie.
Like better than Lord of the Rings type of
yes,
battles?
it is. Well, yeah, but you're looking at a completely different context, right? Lord of the Rings battles are normally like 1,000, 10,000 versus 10,000, whatever. This
Sure.
is one guy versus another guy, 1-on-1. It is the best, one of the best, most brutal choreographed fight scenes in a period piece film that I've ever seen. To me, it's actually the best. Whoever choreographed that scene and pieced that together, the way that they incorporated with the sound of the metal and like, and there's horses, they're dueling on horses, then they get knocked off the horse. That's as much as I'll tell you about what happens. But the way that they piece it together, the way they're hitting each other and going at each other, it feels so fucking raw. It's brutal.
Is it crazier than the Clegane brothers in Game of Thrones fighting?
Yeah. It's more realistic.
Right. Because those dudes are fucking huge when they're like the dog and the mountain.
The dog and the hound?
The hound. Sorry, the hound, the dog.
The dog. The dog and the mountain. Look, I thought that was fine. That really didn't do much for me. In that scene in Game of Thrones, the more memorable thing is the fact that you get to see the mountain without his helmet on once he turned into like that zombie. That's the
Right.
memorable thing in that movie. Or in that part of that show, I should say. That's the memorable thing. This fight scene in The Last Duel is just real. It feels so raw and intense. You feel the stakes. You feel the heaviness of their armor. You feel the mud. You feel the cold snow. You feel the whatever angst that an animosity that they bring in it. The need for survival. You feel the archetype of man in the mud trying to punch back at life.
Right.
Is what you feel. And it's fucking nailed perfectly. So whoever did, and I mean, look, obviously credit goes to Ridley Scott for directing it. Whoever choreographed that scene, though, in the way that they shot it, it's incredible.
I don't know if you ever watch fight choreography preparation videos for films. I think the last time I watched one was for the movie Tenet. Have you ever seen Tenet?
No.
Actually, it's not my favorite Nolan film, but it's great. It's still great. So obviously in the movie there's scenes where, because it's kind of like a time travel ordeal, but also it isn't. It's hard to explain. It's kind of confusing. You move backwards. So like you're going backwards in time, so everything that you're doing is backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And as opposed to shooting the movie going forward, they actually shoot everything going backwards. So when they're doing fight scenes and everything looks like it's happening in reverse, they're actually shooting it in reverse. And I watched John Washington, right? John Washington is his name? Denzel's son? John David Washington, right?
I think so.
Yeah. There's like
He's
watching.
fucking amazing.
Yeah, he's pretty great, dude, actually.
I love in the Black Klansman.
I love that movie.
He's so fucking good in that movie.
But in Tenet, like even when they speak in Russian, there's like moments when they're speaking in Russian, they actually figured out how to enunciate everything backwards. So they're like speaking backwards.
Shit.
And they're doing choreography backwards, like fight choreography scenes backwards. It's actually crazy to watch the making of that movie. Yeah, it was probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But nevertheless, it's always crazy to watch people prep for those. Like John Wick is another one that there is so much time and effort put into them, because you have to make sure that nobody gets hurt on set at the same time, especially you have like a big name actor on set. You want to make sure. Well,
anyone. It's not just the big name actor. You don't want anybody getting hurt.
Yeah, you don't want anybody getting hurt, but the reality is, that's why you have stuntmen, is because people get hurt.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, like, you don't want the guy that has 5 lines to get hurt, or the lady that has like maybe one speech to get hurt. You want everyone to be safe, because it's like, dude. All the danger. Any movie that has that stuff, it's like these guys are trained so well to sell it, right? And then all the stuff in post with the sound, the music, everything, and then the acting, it all comes out and pops off the screen.
Right.
Speaking of productions, what did you think of the Super Bowl production? Not the halftime show.
What do you mean, like
the game? Well, because it was fixed.
What?
Oh, it was fixed.
I strongly disagree with you on that. I think that it was a pretty well played game. It was fair. I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, they called who was it, Eli Apple? They
Yeah.
called a couple penalty flags on at the end that helped Cooper Kupp score a touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, to me, those calls were legitimate. The only fuckery I felt like maybe was because they weren't making those calls throughout the game earlier, and I can understand that.
You
However,
can't do that. That's bullshit.
I personally think that it was a fair trade-off. There was a bad call early on in the third quarter that actually it was the first play of the third quarter that Joe Burrow threw the touchdown. Who did he throw to? Is it was T. Higgins he threw it to, where he got the face mask on Jalen Ramsey and then ran into the end zone and scored a touchdown, and they didn't call that face mask?
I think it was T. Higgins. I'm not sure entirely.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. I thought it was. I don't think it was Jamar Chase because I feel like I would remember that. But okay, for all intents and purposes, let's say T. Higgins, the face mask on Jalen Ramsey, that went uncalled and it ultimately resulted into a touchdown. I've personally felt that there was a fair trade-off in the lack of a call and enforcing one. It just felt like, because here's the thing. If the Bengals would have won, that's all they would have talked about, is that touchdown that happened, and people wouldn't have felt like the Bengals deserved it. But dude, to me, it felt like a fair game. I don't think it was rigged. I don't think it was bought.
Man, I think it's the timing of calls. That's my thing. It's the timing of the call. For example, I understand the whole idea that, if it was T. Higgins, I think it was pulling on Jalen Ramsey's face mask to get enough space to grab that ball to run it in for a touchdown. I get it. But that happened in the first half.
And also, how many times did Joe Burrow get sacked? I mean, that just speaks wonders.
I mean, he got like 7 or 8 times. But my point is, those calls are in the first half. That's one thing to say.
Talking about the face mask?
Yeah.
That was the second half.
Okay, second half. Beginning of the second half.
Yeah.
It still didn't happen at the end of the game. We're talking like the last couple of, under 2 minutes at the end of the game. I just think that the NFL...
But there was a bad holding. That was bad holding.
Right, but there were 3 penalties in a row.
Yeah, but I think they would have scored regardless.
I don't know, man. That to me is like, the NFL looks really bad because they didn't call anything throughout the game. And there were opportunities, like you said, where they could have made calls. If you can make those calls at the beginning, you need the consistency is more important than, we're going to make up calls now at the end of the game. Well, as a fan, as when you're watching it on your TV, it feels fake.
I will say that I don't disagree with you on that. However, I disagree with, I think they thought about this in terms of production. Why they don't make every friggin' call is because you need airtime to go through for all the commercials they have lined up for it. So they can't take the time with all of these penalty flags continuously.
Okay, but we're not even talking about football now. We're talking about advertisers trying to find time to put their commercials in because every spot costs $1 million+ dollars. That's not the game. Like if that's the NFL's reasoning, then it is rigged.
No,
the Super Bowl's rigged then.
I think there's definitely. I mean, dude, I think it worked both ways, man.
I don't know. I think the timing of the calls were bad at the end of the game. I think they were just bad. Look, one of them, I'll give it to you. One of them. To do it 3 times in a row, every time, that to me, there's something. But here's the thing. There's something that's off.
But here's the thing. Wouldn't it be weird though if they made a call for holding and then say you did the same thing again on the very next play, and then you decided not to hold it? Look, call it.
My thing is, when you looked at it in instant replay, there were moments throughout the game before this series, before this quarter, where there were guys on both sides, both teams doing that. A little bit of tugging here, a little bit of pulling here, throughout the entire game. They didn't call those calls. Both teams got away with it. Both. Throughout the whole game. And then all of a sudden, when there's a certain situation that comes up where the Rams have the ball, they're able to move it downfield, and the NFL decides then to start calling that. I don't buy that. I think that the NFL, whoever within the league office, with the referees sending a message down on their headpiece, whatever, through their earpiece, and was like, hey, if the opportunity comes, we've noticed that they're holding. Both teams are holding. Start calling it. Because to me, the timing is just weird, man. And I know I'm not the only person. I was texting friends last night that thought the same thing. The timing of it is too weird.
Think about this. All of those calls happened under 2 minutes. You wouldn't even be able to, like... that's when everything automatically goes under review. And
well, you can't
make any challenge anything
those anyway.
Exactly. So
no, but you couldn't challenge them anyway.
I understand that, but I think because it was under 2 minutes that they felt maybe also the urge to make calls as well.
But that's not fairness to the game. That's my point. It just still isn't fair.
I felt like overall, when you look at the game, it felt fair to me.
It did to me until the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, see, like that call, you could have... Okay.
There's 3 calls.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one. It was 3. One I can deal with.
But say even just the one, I am certain they would have scored on that drive regardless.
I don't think so. I think they could have maybe kicked a field goal and tied it, but I don't think they were going to score necessarily.
It was 3 in a row, so they were just being inched up by...
But I'm saying if one of them, if they only had one call, if the Bengals had one call go against them, I could see then saying, oh, okay, they can hold them here. But when you have 3 bad penalties in a row go after you like that, the defense is just worn down. They're just worn down at that point. The Bengals offensively were beating the Rams defense. The Rams defense is ranked one of the best defenses in the league.
Well, maybe they were beating them.
Best. They were beating them consistently all night. All night they were beating them, even with Burrow getting sacked as many times as he did. Even with Burrow getting sacked and slamming his knee or whatever it was that happened, where it looked like he was out for the game. They were still winning that game, keeping the lead in that. I just think that I think the NFL wanted the Rams to win the game. That's what I think. I think the NFL wanted the LA Rams to win it. Why? Well, it's one of their bigger market teams. They just moved back here a couple of years ago. There's this brand new stadium. I think they wanted them to win the game. That's what I think.
I wouldn't. Here's the thing. I'm not going to go ahead and rule that out. I personally think...
Who's a sexier Super Bowl winner? The Los Angeles Rams or the Cincinnati Bengals?
You know what? If the Bengals would have won, I would have felt that as a football fan. I wouldn't have been upset watching the Bengals win their very first Super Bowl ever. However, if you're somebody who's in it for like the commercialized aspect of the sport, yeah, the Rams are a sexier team to win the game. And listen, you're not wrong. There's no doubt in my mind. But also, I'm going to say that I think it works both ways. I'm not going to completely rule out the fact that, oh, well, you know what? There was a really bad call earlier. Maybe they'll make up for it with this one. Because I think that if they wouldn't have made those calls and they didn't, and it didn't work out in the favor, like say the Bengals won the Super Bowl, right? It would have been damned if I do, damned if I don't. I think that people would have still been talking shit. Oh, that wouldn't have happened if they didn't score that touchdown where Jalen Ramsey got the face mask. They didn't call that. Like, I still think that would have been the case too. I think we would have been having this conversation either way.
I think, man, that professional sports, when it comes to big games or big series for their respective title, I think that there is a definite push that the league and who they want to win. I think they play with storylines. And they want certain scenarios to play out for them to get their storyline. And I think overall it was sexier for the LA Rams with Matt Stafford coming from Detroit. You know, he's been in the league a long time, never winning anything. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Cooper Kupp for that. Odell Beckham for that offensive juggernaut of a team and that core those strong defensive players that I just mentioned. I think the NFL wanted them to win the game. It's as simple as that. And Stan Kroenke is one of the richest owners in the NFL. I think they wanted them to win the game. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals represent that small town, the small town kind of team that doesn't really have and doesn't really spend a lot of money. Dude, they don't even have a fucking indoor practice facility. They're the only team in the NFL that doesn't have an indoor practice facility. They don't practice in LA. They practice in Cincinnati.
Yeah,
where
where it
like
fucking snows.
it snows and it's
Right.
like freezing, or it's like there's pouring down rain and they're practicing. I don't. I think the NFL liked having him in it. I think it was like, oh, it's a nice little storyline. Small town team makes it to the Super Bowl. But
Right.
the NFL, I think, is a business. And dude, I think all professional sports, I think it's gambling plays a big part, and I think they're rigged. I think there's a predetermined outcome for all that stuff.
I'd like to think that's not the case, but I can't help but agree to a certain extent. I think there is a balance, though.
I don't think the players are in on it though.
No, they're not.
The refs are.
I mean, yeah, of course.
The refs are definitely in on it.
If the players were in on it, I think it would have been found out much sooner rather than later.
The refs and the owners are in on it. I think the owners are in on it too, and I think that they leave it up to the players. Like, for example, I always had this theory that game, the game with Falcons Patriots,
The comeback?
yeah, like that wasn't supposed to end that way.
Like the Patriots coming back?
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to end that way. The Falcons were supposed to win that game.
Yeah, see, that's the stuff I'd like to think, too, as well.
I think they were supposed to. I think if you were looking at it as the NFL, I think with the NFL, they had an issue. I think that game was horrible in the first half, right?
Oh, yeah, it was so boring.
It was horrible. It was boring.
Yeah.
And the NFL is all about ratings because they got all their advertisers spending literally there's millions and millions of dollars being poured into this for advertising. Just advertising. If people are tuning out of the fucking game, right, then there's no one watching this ad space. They can't justify making this ad space what it is. They'd have angry advertisers. People be pissed off. So the refs kind of tweak what they're calling. That gives the Patriots, because people forget too, like, dude, all it takes is a couple plays to get your momentum back. It doesn't take you're like, oh no, they're game plan. Dude, everyone game plans well. It's the fucking NFL. These are all pros, and these coaches are all pros. Everyone game plans well. Like, if you listen to any, like Aaron Rodgers talks about on the Pat McAfee show, it's about like execution, right? And finding that momentum and when it comes in. And once you hit that stride, it just is like an easy thing. You might have ups and downs, but you're still gliding through whatever it is. I think that the Patriots had no momentum in that game in particular, and I think that they were allowed to come back by the refs giving them some good calls that would gain that momentum. And once Tom Brady got it, he just didn't let up. It's like, I mean, look, I'm not saying Tom Brady's not great, and Tom Brady wasn't in on it. I don't think he was in on it.
No, even when, you know what? I'm going to be one of those controversial people to say, dude, I don't think Tom Brady had anything to do with Spygate.
No, with that the actual taping process.
No, I mean, I don't think he had any knowledge really to it. Like, I don't think he thought anything of it. Like, I think if anything, maybe he knew anything, that whatever was happening was perfectly fine or whatever. Even the Deflategate thing.
Why would you even say anything at that point? I mean, honestly, what is Tom Brady going to do? He's going to be like, hey, listen, New England's cheating.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, think about being in his... But that's not the point. I mean, I don't think ever the players, even Tom Brady, when it comes to anything remotely consistent with cheating, I don't think they're in on that. I think they all go out there and they play their fucking heart out.
Well, I think that everyone kind of cuts corners. I think Tom Brady knew about the balls being deflated. I think he did it. But
it's
also
by like 2 PSI or whatever.
But dude, I think they all do it.
Yeah,
I think the media just picked the story up because I honestly think the media hates Tom Brady. They hate Tom Brady.
I don't think they hate Tom Brady. I think he's just the most...
dude. Members of the media hate Tom Brady. Dude, when it was linked that Tom Brady had that Donald Trump, the MAGA hat in his locker, they've tried. There's been little moments where they try to take him down. The media does not like Tom Brady. People like Tom Brady. Like fans of the game and fans of the sport like Tom Brady. But the media overall doesn't like Tom Brady. It's the same thing now. They don't like Aaron Rodgers. Dude, when him and Belichick were linked to voting for Trump in 2016, they were linked to that. There was a small little window where they were linked to it. The media didn't like Tom Brady after. And Deflategate, what all happened right around that time. They didn't like him.
If you want to, We can shift the topic to the 2016 election.
We can fucking talk about that all day.
Well, we could talk about how Hillary Clinton is being investigated right now for getting Trump servers hacked and making it look like he colluded with Russia.
Yeah, well, that whole thing is look, this world of this political stuff, this political engine of the United States, let's call it, okay? It's amazing to me that no matter what amount of evidence that someone has presented to them, and I understand you got to look at the source, right, and kind of where it's coming from. But it's amazing to me that no matter what amount of evidence, and there's things that have come out years later that happened literally 2017, 2018, whatever it is, and people are like, "Oh no, that's not true. That didn't happen."
Yeah, and you're like, what?
Well, like this email thing, it's like that apparently somebody within her campaign was paying somebody else to hack his servers, to spy on his campaign. Now,
well, I don't even know if it was just to spy on his campaign. She was her campaign, I should say, was making an attempt to plant information that would suggest he is colluding with Russia to steal the election. That is what she's being investigated for.
Yeah, and see, here's the problem. Will any of this ever actually come to light?
Probably not.
That's what I'm saying. So what is this? So there's clearly a double fucking standard when it comes to being a citizen in this country.
Right.
There's clearly a double fucking standard. And the federal government has been doing this. Like, forget Trump, right? Forget even Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Forget this. This is the last couple of years. And people act like they're like, oh, man, the Republicans and Trump, and they're crazy, and they're racist, and they're this, and they're that. And it's like, dude, here's the deal. If you think that one side is that, then I have news for you. Both sides are that. If you want to firmly believe in your heart that one side is a bunch of isms and ists, then both sides are that. Because they're in on this together. They're in on this together to present you with the illusion that there is a choice, that someone actually has your best interest at heart. They don't have your best interest at heart. The person that has your best interest at heart is your family and your friends. Those are the people that have your best interest at heart. When there are the political system of this country, especially the federal government, was never designed to be this big. It wasn't supposed to be this big. It was designed to be small, and it was designed to make sure that the states' rights were being protected, that the states had their own autonomy to govern in the way that they wanted to govern. And now, the office of the presidency which was really just supposed to be a referee of sorts over the states. And now it's become this highly centralized, highly federal position where it feels that every move of every day, there's some news or there's some new tweet, whatever, some news article or just some little piece of information. And it could be a tweet, it could be whatever, about whatever the president's doing, about whatever moves that they made, about whatever it is that is not going in the right direction with the country. And whatever it's being used for, whether you agree with it, if it's a positive story or whether it's a negative story, it feels to me that it's only meant to create division within the country. That's it.
Well, the reality is, on television, what we see is a couple of bickering parties, when the reality is they're eating at the same fucking dinner table anyway.
Yeah, and you know what? You and I aren't fucking invited.
Yep.
That's what people that live near you, or that live near you, near me. The problem is California, especially LA, is lost. for the most part.
Oh yeah.
They're so brainwashed into believing that these people in these positions of power have their best interests at heart. And dude, it's not. And a lot of it is like a more socialized version of like, unity under this similar idea, which to me is just another twisted version of Christianity that goes back to like the Inquisition. It's a cult. It's a
Oh
cult
yeah. I was
like
about to say
thinking.
yeah.
And it's like people out here a lot, especially within this industry, the entertainment industry, whatever it is, they've substituted some kind of spiritual morality for government morality, which is an ever-changing, ever-evolving system of the state. So if the state is changing every single day and dictating what is morality, then you have to constantly check with yourself to see what's moral. So you're always going out and you're walking around living your day, constantly questioning whether you're doing what's actually considered moral or just. For example, like if you don't wear a mask walking around your neighborhood, everyone's fucking doing it. Does that make you a bad person?
No.
Okay, but this was dictated apparently by science, and obviously that science has shifted, which, I will give it that credit. Science shifts. That's what happens. But say that you just don't want to do it just because it goes against, say, the core fabric of what this nation was designed to be.
Well, people.
But I'm saying you're the bad guy then.
Well, I'll say this. People can be very stupid, and they've been convinced that you're actually killing them by doing that. And they think that your right to be able to not wear a mask is your way of saying, I don't care whether or not you live or die. They've been groomed to believing that.
It's fear cult.
Of course. And
it's a death cult is what it is.
The two things that sell in this country, and that's the media is really good at creating a formula around this, but the two things that sell are fear and hate. So what is something that you're going to make everybody afraid of? Well, let's just say there's a fucking pandemic, and let's convince people that, you know what, this isn't you losing your rights, this is you protecting life. So if you don't do this, you're going to die. Obviously,
or you're going to kill someone else.
Or you're going to kill someone else.
Right.
And obviously, any reasonable person would think at first hearing that, oh, that's kind of scary. When you bring death into the equation, yeah, it's not something people take very lightly. Now, same thing with hate. Well, what are you going to do? Well, let's divide people based off of how they look. And let's put race into the factor, something that is concrete and cannot be questioned. You look different from him. And let's just see where that goes. Right?
Well,
then,
yeah, I hear what you're saying with that. I will have to say that America does have national sins that it's paying for to this day.
Of course it does. And
but
nobody is questioning that.
Right. But when I say America, it's like it's the same mechanism that has been guiding this thing since those days of the older sins like slavery and like by the the discrimination laws and things like that. That culture was dictated by the government. It was dictated by the government.
That was what I was going to make with my point is, listen, those people that created the problem are the same people that are telling you are trying to fix it. I'm confused as to where they've earned my trust or your trust, because as far as I'm concerned, they haven't earned mine. I don't know why everybody else feels as if they've earned theirs.
It's smoke screens.
Well, of course it is.
The media points the camera, turns the microphone on, and that's what you're supposed to look at. Yep. It's every day. It's nonstop, incessant every day. So a lot of people tuned out. I mean, CNN's ratings have dropped, and it's like because CNN became a chatterbox for just nonsense. It's nonsense. There's a lot of things like I was looking at there was like Daily Mail or some other news source. I was just looking at a couple different ones today, and they're talking about like these accusations that are being played out with Hillary and like hacking the Trump servers to plant this information. CNN didn't even have it up on their website.
Well, of course not. It would.
Yeah,
it would
but my
crumble their own narrative.
no, but my point is like you're not journalists then. If there's truth to this, there's truth to it. And this is the version of truth that is played out in the country where it's like, well, this is my truth is what I want it to be. So whatever I want is what so like we're training people to think in dictatorial ways. That's tyrannical thinking. Look, you have your version, you have your truth. I have my truth. But you have to I feel that you have to have the cognitive ability to separate from, okay, well, I have my truth and I can share my truth with the world, but that's not necessarily the truth. It's very important to separate those two things, because what happens is then if everyone is just screaming about their truth, about how you and demanding that those around them must justify and rationalize their truth, you're demanding something that is it's tyrannical to demand that. And you're also ignoring the fact that other people have their versions of what's happening based on their own perceptions, based on their own feelings, their own upbringings, what have you. So that's kind of like, it's creating such a vast degree of separation between people that we're not allowed to come together and even talk about this. Like you and I are talking about this. People literally tell you to say you're a piece of shit for talking about this, that you're like somehow less of a human being. And this is where it's taking a form of a cult, some kind of tyrannical cult, because you're allowed to talk about this. You live in the United States of America. Whether people agree with the past, whether they don't agree with the past, people fought wars to defend what this was, what the founding fathers put on a piece of paper, or a sovereign nation. And that is the simplest way that you can explain it. The founding fathers were willing to die, put their name on a document and die. We were talking about this with our buddy just the other day with Will the other day. Them writing their name on the Declaration of Independence was them saying, I am willing to die for this cause. The king didn't look at that and be like, okay, let's call them up and see if we can just chat. No, he's like, no, I want all of their heads. They're dead. This is something that is like, and look, times were tough then. They're way tougher than they are now. We have it so fucking easy compared to what they had it. But beyond the external factor of some king across the ocean that they had to deal with, dude, you had like the cold and like disease that there were no cures for, and like just food and figuring out how to way to like feed your family, take care of your family, live and survive. People's kids, like people would have 15 kids, and half of them would die before they're even born, or before they even reach the age of 4. So the context for all this stuff is lost within our modern predicament. And the modern predicament is that because we don't struggle, we create problems. We embrace victimhood to feel a sense of struggle, to feel like we exist.
I 100% agree with that. And people right now, and this goes with a lot of things that's going on in this country, but people are being groomed into believing that victimhood is almost like a privilege, or I wouldn't say much of a privilege, but it's like people feel a sense of entitlement for being a victim. So now people are coming.
They feel like they're better than you.
Well, they do. And they're going to go as far out of the way as to making up a gender to making themselves a victim, or identifying themselves as non-binary, as if being a gender is subjective. Now, you can identify and call yourself whatever it is that you like to call yourself. I have no issues with people that do that. As a matter of fact, I'm very pro LGBTQ everything, but I'm also like realistic. Hey, listen, I understand this is what you are. I could tell you as a man, you could say, oh, identify as a woman. Well, that's weird because I'm attracted to things with a vagina. Do you have a vagina? Because that's all I'm asking. Well, you're clearly a man, not attracted to men, no offense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's no real reasoning with it. There's no reasoning with someone because they just say, I'm a victim.
Well, you're not allowed to have a conversation about it.
Right.
It just the act of having a conversation is interpreted as violence, where violence is violence.
Yeah.
Conversations aren't violence.
And that's
words are not violence. I
Right.
don't care what any they're not violence. Violence is violence. When someone says words are violence,
I can understand if someone said words fuel violence. I could understand
that's
that.
but see, that's more specific. But to
Sure.
say that's not what people say. They say words are violence.
Right. No,
And
that's
unless
not
you've
true.
been in a real fight, you don't know what violence is. Violence is violence. But yes, words fuel violence. And I think it's important to note that being specific and having the specificity to say that shifts the conversation. Because then what does it do? Oh, it makes you more responsible for the words that you choose, right? Just by saying what you said.
Of
Words
course.
fuel violence. Instead of saying, but by saying words are violence, that it's too generic. Because then it makes me think about, well, what words you see how it makes you think? What words are violence? And then you don't know. And you're in a state of confusion. And that's the point.
Well, I mean, there are words that you could say and they would perhaps make you feel some type of way on the inside. There's no doubt in my mind. Like, for example, the N word definitely kind of makes the hairs on the back of my neck raise up a little bit.
Of
or,
course, but
you
it's
know,
like
or whatever. Like those are words that nobody wants to say or hear or whatever. But at
of
the
course,
same
but
time,
that word is also associated with like horrible shit.
Oh.
It's associated with a whole group of people being delegated as second, third, fourth, fifth class citizens.
right.
Like the word doesn't have a positive appropriation. It doesn't have a positive appropriation to it.
Right.
So there is a certain, but the word itself is not the word is hurtful.
It's well, yeah, it's.
And I mean, even then,
It
it's
could
like
be whatever however you choose to take it.
right. But it's like you and I having this discussion. You and I know if you say that word to somebody, anybody, anyone, but especially if you use that word and say it to an African American, you know what that word. There's history to that word. There's cultural negative bullshit to that word.
Right.
That is, you're only looking for a fight.
Yeah.
You're only looking for a reason to get into a fight. So
Exactly.
you are looking for violence in that.
I will say this. It takes to the tango. So someone can call you an incredibly insulting name. How you choose to take it and handle it is completely up to you. And it's going to decide how this interaction goes forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, and the other issue is too is that like the state has determined what's allowed to be. The state, there's laws against fighting someone, which I think is weird.
Well, I think that if two people, I think assault is different, but if it's two people who are like condoning, like, hey, you know, I'm down to get into a fist fight.
No, I'm not saying like some guy jumping some woman in the middle of the night. Like, no, dude, that's like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I am saying that there are certain scenarios where like a guy would jump some woman in the middle of the night, beat her up or whatever, and then a dude goes out and tries to defend her and beats that guy up, and then the guy that beat up that guy is wrong. And you're like, well, why?
Right.
No, he's not. Why? Why is he in trouble? He shouldn't be in trouble. Because the state needs to have the control. The state monopolizes violence.
You know, it's
the
crazy.
state authorizes their own violence. So you're not allowed to be violent to anyone, even if it's for the right reasons or in defense of the right cause. You're not allowed. Why? Because you're not the state. That's bullshit. That's not common law.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. That's an illegal and abusive form of government power. If you step in to save someone, to help someone out who's being victimized, and yet you get in trouble for that, that's bullshit.
I agree. Well, I even, we'll take it a step further and talk about the Second Amendment a little bit. I don't want to chime into it too much because I can talk about it all day. But, as hard as it is to get a concealed carry firearm in Los Angeles, you could still have one. And, if you want to go as far as to just say you're in a situation and you feel as if it needs to de-escalate because that person could potentially be violent and you're carrying, it's so bizarre how it's illegal to kind of just flash the fact that you have a firearm and you say, listen, if I were you, I would walk away. I'm carrying. That's technically illegal to do here, which I think is kind of weird.
California has weird laws.
It doesn't make any sense.
California worships itself. It has weird laws, and it only allows itself to be the harbinger of justice. And people can sit here and say, "Well, that's law and order. That's law and order." It's not law and order.
No.
If you have a personal issue and something's going on, and you need to defend yourself, or you shouldn't have to think and go to your head to wonder to yourself, "Am I allowed to do this, or am I going to get in trouble?"
Well, I don't know if you know. I think they just call it the S's, where it's shout, shove, show, shoot, then shoot to kill. So, obviously, if you're in a situation that needs to be de-escalated, you shout. If that doesn't work and they're coming at you still, you shove. And if that doesn't work, you show. Say, hey, I'm carrying. And if that doesn't work, you shoot at like the ground. You're supposed to do just discharge around and say, hey, I'm warning you, and then shoot to kill. Now, the reason as to why that is not just shoot to injure, shoot to kill is because it's literally, they tell you that because guess what? If you shoot somebody in self-defense and they live, they could fucking sue you. They could sue you to the ground. Potentially, you might have criminal charges pending against you, which is bizarre. You literally have to kill someone to save yourself from litigation.
That's fucking crazy. Where'd you hear that?
My brother was telling me about it. It's a big thing, because it happens. People will get shot, like they'll shoot an intruder in their home, and that person will end up suing the person defending themselves. That's
fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a thing.
Just the times that we live in now, and I'm, you and I aren't old enough to know something that happened, what it was like living 50 years ago, but the times are just so fucking weird, man. And the way that everyone is so divisive and against each other, and like whether you believe in this or you look like this or you identify as this, and this whole thing is like the last thing that exists in this is fucking love.
Yeah,
we are not in this together.
And that's so the virtue
apparent.
Signaling.
We are not. People. I hear people say it all the time. Oh, we're in this together. No, we're not. It doesn't feel that way.
Well, and it's funny, those same people will say, you're with me or you're against me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it doesn't, we're not allowed to just say, hey, and look, I understand culture shifts and like things. There were, especially, and like the big thing is like, I am a big believer in this, especially like being a believer, a person that studies history as well, is like, dude, African Americans out of anyone in this country got the rawest of the deals, right?
Yeah.
We talked about this before, but like even after World War II, there were men that would serve in the military and then come home and not be allowed to like establish lines of credit, home lines of credit and stuff.
Yeah.
That's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, it's really sad. Well, it helped create generations of
poverty.
Right.
Where you could have had the World War II generation, those guys coming back, starting families, and you could have had like development of wealth start. So like by this generation, you're talking like 3.5-ish, something like that at that point later. 3.5, yeah, like 3.5 generations later.
Yeah.
You could have
80
had
years ago.
Yeah, you could have had like generational wealth develop. And the fact that there were mechanisms within the government in place to do that is fucking ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where it sounds crazy, man. I know a lot of people are against this, but when you hear the term of like reparations that come into play to kind of like make up for that, as time goes on and the older I've gotten, my stance on that, I'm like, this could work. Like this is something to consider. Especially, do they just pass that freaking like trillions of dollars of stimulus packages?
Yeah. The only thing that makes it difficult to differentiate is that you have people being taken out of poverty, which is not a bad thing, but people will be taken out of poverty based off of the color of their skin. So then,
I hear that, man, but you got to look at from
I agree.
From the other side, though, is like, their ancestors, ancestors in this case were taken out of their own country against their way. And look, the United States benefited industrially on the backs of slave labor.
Yeah.
And the founding fathers were aware of this too. They knew this. I mean, Jefferson tried to make it illegal to own slaves before he was even president. He tried to make it illegal to own slaves in the state of Virginia, in the Virginia legislature. People don't even learn this. That it's like people are like, oh no, he did have slaves. But he tried to make it illegal to own them.
You know what's crazy? At the time, I felt like owning a slave was like owning an iPhone. Everybody kind of.
I don't know. Look.
At one point or another, though.
No, I mean the country was built off of the backs of slave labor. It's like there's no other way to put it. It's like because it was free.
Oh yeah,
and there were wealth consolidated because of it. It went up to it consolidated into these families that had long historical ties to England, and that moved here and were purchased slaves and had purchased thousands of acres and had crops and the whole thing. And what sucks, I think, is that there was literally a war to free this. A part of it was freeing the slaves, and that the Reconstruction period was just so bad for the South that the South was able to, the southern part of the United States after the Civil War. And I mean, there's the historical theories of like, oh, if Lincoln would have lived, that because he had a whole plan for Reconstruction, that what really failed the post-Civil War and what really failed the African Americans was the lack of Reconstruction. It fucked up. It made it really, really bad because the South was able then to discriminate more in more subtle ways, like creating laws. Dude, even after the Civil War was over, there were some Southerners that were like, no, you're still a piece of property. And it's like, dude, this is the country's great sin. And it's like,
I mean, it's the same thing with Native Americans where we give them, some sort of like tax defer program where it's like they don't really have to pay that, and they're also given land rights and rights to be able to own and operate casinos before.
Well, they're their own nation.
Exactly.
They're their own sovereign land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they run and operate that way, which to a degree for them, I understand. I mean, we took this from them. I mean, it does make sense. I guess if you wanted to go into the reparations argument as well, I mean, maybe it's not much of an argument. I do agree that I think people, if their ancestors are linked back to, because I don't want it to play off the color of your skin. I mean, you could be Jamaican or Haitian as well, right?
Yeah, but dude, Jamaican and Haitian were also. No, I mean, but that was a part of the Atlantic slave trade.
I guess that's actually no. Well, you're not wrong about that actually. So if you're linked directly, I'm talking about recently. People off the banana boat in 2008 or whatever the fuck, not 1840.
Well, yeah, I mean, dude, even my family didn't get here until 12 or something like that. 1915, they didn't get here.
Right. My point is, if your ancestry is linked back to slavery as well, like your ancestors were slaves, I think that perhaps I think some sort of compensation should be in order to those families, like some sort of inherited wealth from that.
Yeah, I think when you look at the government and how the government failed to adapt quickly, and I think a lot of it was the culture of the country, but I think if the government would have made those moves at the right time and did the right thing at the right time, we could have avoided a lot of this strife.
Right.
And I think that it's obviously a still delicate thing, and it has every right to be that. But I think that, and it is annoying, like you hear people, because I've heard people on both sides, the other side of the aisle, be like, oh, it happened so long ago, who cares, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, if, dude, if you couldn't drink out of the same water fountain because of the color of your skin, like that would fucking piss you off too.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, and so when people say like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's like, I think that it needs to be, my feel is like, recognize it for what it is. and let's come up with a plan to all move forward, heal from it, you know. And if there has to be some form of reparation that's into it, I'm down for that. I think that it's like, make it smart though. Like, don't be stupid about it. Like, make it smart, you know, where all the, you know, everyone's able to kind of have their input, say what it is that they want to say about it, and come up with something that's smart, that's strategic, that's going to build back the lost generational wealth. Because, dude, when you really think about it, and like my family went through this, I had both grandfathers, uncles serve in World War II, and they got back, dude. That's when they really built names for themselves. They were able to buy homes, build homes, raise families. You know, the baby boomer generation, that whole thing. And when you see that there were like other men, soldiers, died in Europe, died in the Pacific, fighting the Imperial Japan and fighting the Third Reich and all this shit. And you see that they come back, and because of the color of their skin, they're not able to work their way up and gain lines of credit and build homes and all these things. And they have to be pushed into like, you know, uh, like Section 8 housing, all these things. To like, I just think that, dude, our government fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Like,
no doubt.
really bad, man. And it's like they had the moment, they were able to step up to the plate. I'm sure dozens of other times. And I know, you know, we're working on it and we're getting it right, or we're trying to at least, and like get it in the right direction. But dude, that just to me is like, when people say they're like, "Oh, the United States was built on the back of slave labor," I'm like, yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah, listen. You know, you can hold people accountable for their sins, right? All day. You know what's crazy is that something that was even more prevalent and recent was the concentration camps in Germany back in the 40s. And you can't even go to Germany and bring something like that up without Germans feeling offended by it, because it is horrific. But they've moved past it and they understand. So I think it's safe to say you do have some people in this country, and for some reason the media loves to highlight these people as if it represents the country as a whole. But these like weird racist people, you know, that do come out every now and again, it's not as common as people make it to be. I mean, I've grown up in the South where, you know, maybe some people might have racist tendencies, but I wouldn't consider people to ultimately be a racist, right? Like, I've seen it, but it's not what defines us as a nation. I feel like people are very unified as a whole.
I mean, dude, I have this. I mean, we can wrap this whole thing on this too. This is my idea of an American. Being an American is not a race. It's not a religion. It's not a gender. It's not an age. Being an American is a mindset. Being an American is a conscious decision. Being an American is a consciousness. There's never been a definable identity. Even if people say that there was in the 18th century, where there's certain characteristics, certain financial characteristics, certain, you know, ethnic characteristics that were pretty consistent in a through line, absolutely. But that has nothing to do with America. America is the individual human being and their relationship with whatever form of a creator, God, whatever it is, morale, whatever it is that they, something bigger than themselves that they look at and they say, I choose my own path. I choose my way. I'm free to choose my way. And with no fear of a man made archetype above them, such as a government or an army or some threat, some institution above them getting in the way of being whatever it is that you want to be. And if there is, the healthy American consciousness, the healthy American mindset, the healthy American heart, mind, and spirit would be to say to an institution that's getting in the way of you being what you can be, would be to say, fuck you. That is the American spirit. That's what it's always been. We've never treated each other well. We have sometimes. For the most part, we fight, we blame, we criticize, we make fun of. That's what we do. Because America also is the freedom to be the cruelest form. It's free to witness the cruelty of the human spirit. America allows the cruelty of the human spirit to be displayed with no threat of life, is what it allows. So with allowing that, the other side of the coin is it also allows the inventiveness, the ingenuity, the genuineness, the elevation, the transcendence of all of those base human instincts. Whether that is to define each other based on the color, like you solely define someone based on and look, for some people, it is a part of their identity. It is. That's fine. You accept it, you acknowledge it, and you move on, but you realize that that's not the whole. That's not the big picture. The big picture is it's a consciousness, it's a spirit, it's a fire in the gut, is what it is. The founding fathers knew this. Dude, they fucking dumped tea in the harbor and started a fucking revolution because they were getting taxed for tea. If you don't think that those guys knew what they were fucking pissed. And that's the thing today, is no one is pissed. And if they are, they're not showing it. They're so comfortable with their iPhones, even being able to go to Whole Foods and get a fucking baked chicken for $9.99. You know how much of a luxury that is?
I think it's funny. People, that's very well said, by the way. I think it's funny is that what people don't understand about freedom is it is a give and take. When people say freedom isn't free, you can go on to carry on about people who fight and die for it in this country,
Yes.
which is very true. Also, you got to realize that, freedom, it gives you the luxury of being able to do what you want.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what people choose to do with what they want may not always serve society as a whole. But you're right. With everything you said, it's pretty spot on.
Let the discrimination of the best thoughts take place. Let the discrimination of the best course of action take place. Do not let an institution define for you what is the best way to think, or what is the best way to speak, or what is the best way to act. An institution should never define that for you. Let the people define that as the people, not an institution. Because then it's not free. You're being guided like sheep. You're being guided like cattle to the slaughter to be what they want you to be. And it slowly but surely is what's going to happen. The founding fathers committed treason to the British crown for way less than what's going on today. They literally did it because they were getting the shittier goods from England sent to them for their businesses, and because they felt that they were getting unfairly taxed because they didn't have a representative in Parliament. And I know, historically speaking, it's a fact. These guys owned slaves. They were very wealthy. They were probably more comfortable than 99% of the people that were living over here at the time. And they still said, fuck it. This is bullshit. This is not how we're supposed to live. This is not how human beings are supposed to live under this. They were the rich. They could have easily just been like really close with the British crown. smoothed it all over, and it would have been just business as usual. To this day, it would have stayed the same, business as usual. So when they were the 1% of their day here, not all of them, but a lot of them were. Washington was one of the richest families in the colonies. He was. Jefferson had a great upbringing. They weren't like wealthy, but had a great upbringing. He had this family, same thing. Owned plantations, the whole thing. Great upbringing. He saw what was happening was wrong, that the institution of slavery was wrong. I told you, I think it was 3 times historically documented in the Virginia legislature that he tried to outlaw slavery in the state of Virginia. It was completely like unanimously voted down that would be made illegal. He tried. This is a guy that owned slaves. He tried doing it 3 times.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier, weren't we?
Yeah, like earlier. Yeah. But no, I mean there is. They didn't create a perfect union then. And we still haven't created one now.
We're the most perfect imperfect system
that there is
in the world.
But look, they laid the framework for something to aspire to. They laid the framework. And I'll tell you what, we've forgot that.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it basically... dude, I guarantee you, in 100 years from today, a lot of the shit that we're doing now is what people are probably going to go on to carry on of being offensive. You know,
it could, man.
I mean, it could, but maybe not everything. But
yeah, I think the main thing is just to be able to keep the spirit of these conversations alive. Dude,
yeah.
You don't have to agree with me. It doesn't matter to me. It's like, if you don't, well, then let's let the greatest idea go to battle. Let's let the ideas go to battle, and let's let the greater one emerge victorious. And, you use facts, you use information, you use passion to dictate your rhetoric to win over someone else. That's the way that's the human way to handle things, unless you want to be like animals in the woods. Like, that's how human beings handle things for the most part.
I think the biggest contributing factor to anything is to take in is human nature. A lot of people seem to exclude that from the equation, whether you talk about, the Atlantic slave trade or Nazi Germany or whatever have you. You got to think about the era you're living in and the stakes that are present and what is really truly going on, because you can look at it from every single angle, and what people go through is just nothing more than a human experience.
Yeah, man, dude, I think it's a human experience, and it goes around and around and around, and it's unfortunate that a lot of human experiences and a lot of our current situations have just been built on the fact that we have done horrible shit to each other. But it's like, I think you got to acknowledge that stuff in order to heal it. That's why it's important to acknowledge the sins of the country and the sins of the past. You may not be personally responsible for it, but you do benefit from certain things, as do I. And it's like, it's okay to say like, hey, yeah, this is true. This happened. And it's like, let's find a way to make this heal, and let's heal it and work forward towards something that's like, let's keep that ideal alive. But the thing is, the conversation has to be equal. If the conversation is killed in its crib and it's killed in its infancy, and I'm labeled a name or you're labeled a name just because we don't fit a certain archetype, that doesn't lead to peace and unity. That leads to something worse. And so we have to sit at the table to do these things. It's like, look, and the beauty is with us doing this, like literally talking into microphones, recording this and sharing it with everyone, they can believe with it or not. They can agree with it or not. And whether you do or you don't, that's the beauty of this country. That's the beauty of what it is to be an American, to live here.
Well said. And, on that note, I think we can leave off with, what Martin Luther King said something that's pretty profound, and I think it's just, how everybody should kind of live, where it's something along the lines of, darkness cannot drive out the dark, only light could do that, and hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. And I think that's kind of, but I think it's beautiful because, you got to think about in the era in which he spoke out in that, it's during the civil rights era, and the hate that he had to deal with and the shit that he went through. I mean, it's nothing compared to what people go through today. I mean, in this country, I should say. I'm not going to speak for other countries.
I mean,
I know,
the guy,
but
the guy put his life on the line for what he believed in. So,
literally did.
You can't really ask. You can't ask anything more of a person to do. But yeah, man, well said. And on that note, just call it a show.
Great, because I have to take a shit so fucking bad.
My God,
right now.
dude. Fuck.
I do. I've had to take a shit for the past
Just
half an hour.
coloring the end of the conversation with this. Anyway, yeah, man, we'll be back at it next week. But yeah, man, good talk.
Good talk.
Later.